Hello to all of you. Welcome back. We're looking at what happened to F1's blown diffusers. The ones that I saw and just learned about, oh God, a week or two ago? They sound absolutely insane. One of the weirdest and coolest things I've ever heard. I didn't know how to feel about them at the time, but they grew on me. They're really neat. And so now I'm thinking, where did those go? What happened? Well, hopefully we're going to learn that today. This is a video from Autosports. It'll be linked in the description down below so you can check out the whole thing uninterrupted and browse their channel. And this was recommended to me by a bunch of people. So thank you guys for always recommending awesome stuff. Let's check this out. I want to know what happened to these. These were nuts.
The blown diffuser. The blown diffuser was not a new concept by any stretch of the imagination, as many cars throughout the 1980s and early 90s harnessed the exhaust gases to provide an aerodynamic boost.
I love
the
those
major
little
difference,
cars.
though, was that these earlier attempts were crude interpretations, with the tailpipe of the exhaust fed right into the diffuser, making life extremely difficult for the driver. The driver's inputs on the throttle controlled the amount of downforce available, as more throttle meant more exhaust gas. This meant that many drivers had to try and adapt their driving style to suit, sometimes counterintuitively getting on and off the power accordingly, depending on the scenario. The practice fell out of favour when diffusers were cut back in the 1990s, but Adrian Newey was more than happy to rekindle a solution from the past, moving the exhaust tailpipes down towards the floor, and rather than blowing into the diffuser, they'd now blow the sides of it. Knowing others would be quick to see its potential, Red Bull even attempted to disguise its intentions when it first tested the solution, placing stickers on the bodywork in the old exhaust position to throw others off the scent.
That kind of stuff goes on in F1. That's what's been fascinating for me, is learning all the ins and outs of every little detail and how each team has their own tricks and their own formula, hence Formula One, right? Their own formula to success and the lengths they go to conceal things and, stand out and hope that no one else copies them or whatever. It's very interesting. And a side to the sport that I didn't know existed before I learned about it. I think it's part of the appeal. Interesting and amazing, the engineering race that happens. Each car is a marvel of engineering and has its own formula to win. And I think that's so cool. In a lot of racing series, it's always just copy and paste cars, see who's the better driver. In this, you have good drivers that are battling out, and you have the car element where they're all, slightly different. I think it's really cool.
Intentions when it first tested the solution, placing stickers on the bodywork in the old exhaust position to throw others off the scent. But Formula One engineers certainly aren't stupid, and as expected, it wasn't long before others caught wind and began to copy the solution, as they quickly realised the aerodynamic benefits that having their exhaust tailpipes in similar positions would have. Red Bull held a considerable advantage over their competitors, though, as they had a head start on an incredibly important aspect of making the blown diffuser a potent aerodynamic tool. Working closely with Renault, they'd been able to design engine maps that meant the exhaust gases would be pumped out of the engine even as the driver trailed off the throttle. Just like that, the past issues with blown diffusers was gone. And downforce was still being created when the driver was braking and driving into the apex.
Makes sense. Before, they would lift, and then all your exhaust, your air coming out, everything would change and probably cause some problems. Maybe they would spin out, things like this. It would cause an unsettledness in the car. And there you go. How do you solve that? You lift off, but you're still going to have air, exhaust flowing out. However they made that possible. I think that's really cool, and of course would make it more stable. This is the type of thing where it's just like fascinating to learn about. It really is.
And downforce was still being created when the driver was braking and driving into the apex. The FIA sought to discourage this entire practice, moving to change the regulations about the location of the exhaust for 2011. However, they failed pretty spectacularly, as no fewer than 3 different designs immediately emerged to try and counteract those rules, and regain the performance that was originally thought lost. The 2 most extreme solutions to arrive were from McLaren and Lotus, as they tortuously routed the exhaust within the side pod to try and place the tailpipe in a position where they thought they'd gain the most aerodynamically. In the case of McLaren, its fantail solution had a nozzle that was mated to the floor and blew through a long slot along the edge. It was supposed to act in much the same way as a skirt, creating a seal between the floor and the track. But not all good ideas work in practice though, and this one didn't even make it through testing, as the team struggled with heat management issues and the rigidity of the exhaust over the flexibility of the floor. Over at Lotus, they'd opted to stretch the exhaust outlet all the way to the front of the floor. Their forward-facing exhaust solution had shown promise when tested against other designs, and also proved less susceptible to changes in throttle, resulting in an easier car to drive.
Fascinating
Meanwhile,
stuff.
Red Bull had come up with
Wow.
a solution that was swiftly followed by the rest of the grid. It created wide, low exhaust that sat on top of the floor and exited into the channel between the side of the tyre and the outer diffuser wall.
No way.
This solution
Wow.
helped to mitigate a problem known as tyre squirt, which sees jets of air push laterally into the diffuser's path as the tyre is squashed under load.
Wow.
It must not be underestimated just how large a role Renault played in the project,
Wow.
as Red Bull continued to refine and exploit the physical design of the exhaust, while Renault helped to create maps that made the engine act like an air pump when off throttle.
Yo, this is this is like, and I mean this in a good way. This is why I'm loving Formula One. This is like so different than NASCAR. Honestly, this is on another level compared to pretty much most racing series you can name. I mean, this is just, the engineering is enough to like blow your mind. It's crazy, man.
Following the changes in the 2012 regulations, where blown diffusers were inadvertently banned due to the regulations where exhaust outlets could be placed,
Why?
teams were forced to think outside the box, as they weren't prepared to give up the performance they'd found.
Yeah, why did they get rid of
the
this?
Coanda effect. When F1 wanted to remove the blown diffusers, the technical working group, comprising of the bigger team's technical chiefs, had to work out how to stop it. But both Red Bull, represented by Paul Monaghan, and McLaren, represented by Paddy Lowe, had both experienced an effect in the wind tunnel in which the exhaust gases were drawn along the bodywork of the car. So in those meetings, the two, having considered that a benefit, surreptitiously began to text each other during the phone conferences in order to manoeuvre the regulations to their liking. The eventual bounds that the FIA settled on suited them perfectly, giving both Red Bull and McLaren a head start in bringing the Coanda effect into play. McLaren's solution was the most widely adopted for 2012, extending the rear of the side pods outwards to help the exhaust plume produce the Coanda effect. The jet of exhaust gas expelled from the engine pulled nearby airflow towards it, ensuring that it took the right path to the gap between the tyre's sidewall and the diffuser's outer wall, just as it was with the exhaust-blown diffuser solutions used in 2011. The critical thinking behind the design with the McLaren solution was that with the exhaust mounted in a pod that overhung the side pod, airflow would still flow around the side pod and into the Coke bottle region.
Yeah.
This was a key issue that the users of the ramp solution, such as Sauber, had to wrestle with. The exhaust gases would mix with the flow ordinarily destined for the Coke bottle region, diluting the effect of both.
Oh, that's not good.
Red Bull, however, wanted a solution that brought the best of both worlds. This was a more complex prospect and needed a tunnel to help the two effects cross over.
Wow.
This would not come without its complications, though, as the team grappled with trying to make it work in the real world after simulations offered some promising potential. Red Bull was convinced that it was onto something special, and it actually ran a benign exhaust solution through the course of pre-season, mainly in an attempt to delay anyone being able to copy its arrangement. It finally unveiled its crossover ramp solution on the penultimate day of testing, but duly came up against issues, as it suddenly found that it had flow instability with the tunnel that made the car inconsistent on turn-in. But still, the team continued its development. The regulatory changes for 2012 not only had an impact on the position of the exhaust, but also the surrounding bodywork. As such, many of the teams seen up and down the grid that used the Coanda style solution had bodywork with a trough-like appearance. This was bounded by the new regulations, and most opted for a simple letterbox style trough. Meanwhile, Red Bull continued to develop, now with a renewed effort being made to reshape the crossover tunnel's entrance, in order to smooth the passage of airflow into the tunnel and beyond.
Jeez.
This meant a total redesign of the side pod, including the movement of the exhaust tailpipe. There was also a lengthening of the tunnel, the shape of the tunnel's entrance being enlarged, and a vertical separating slot mounted within.
Wow.
At this point, it appeared that the team had finally got on top of its aerodynamic instability issues, and the car behaved more predictably, meaning it could now hunt for extra performance.
This is wild, man. This is just like, let me reiterate, this is like way over my head from what I knew, months ago before I started learning about this stuff. I just had I figured Formula One, I always knew was like top tier racing. But the fact that I just had no idea the scope of how much science and engineering and changes that happened all the time. And they gotta redesign stuff for a fast car, a stable car, while adhering to new rules that seem like they're constantly changing. It's a wild sport for everyone involved. It really is. But luckily for us spectators, we get to just sit back and enjoy the show. It's crazy, man. It's crazy.
From a continued push to refine the crossover tunnels and bodywork that surrounded the exhaust shape. and a renewed effort by Renault to find ways to stabilise the exhaust flow.
Like, this is all about exhaust.
Meanwhile, the team had worked out that the plume created by the exhaust shape, itself mandated by the new regulations, was having a detrimental effect. In order to soften a damaging vortex that was being formed, it worked on using a Helmholtz resonance chamber, a noise control device that absorbs any excess energy to minimise the amount of drone inside. Doing that, Red Bull was able to essentially damp the exhaust, to create a more even distribution of exhaust gases. The amount of work done by Red Bull during 2012 to make the solution work was monumental, but that's not to say the others on the grid were resting on their laurels either. Sauber, who started with the ramped solution, switched to a McLaren-esque Coanda solution during the season instead, while Ferrari remained an outlier throughout the early phases of 2012. The team preferred to try and modify its Acer duct solution on an ad hoc basis, while it worked out the best way to maximise the Coanda solution. The FIA let the use of these Coanda-style exhausts slide for 2013, knowing the financial burden that the teams had gone through to develop them, with even more advanced versions appearing through the season.
Jeez.
They were also aware that with the new hybrid rules coming into play for 2014, the ability to blow the diffuser with the exhaust would just simply no longer be viable. So while the Coanda exhausts...
So comes the new era that I am enjoying, and I do watch now every race. I very much enjoy it, and I can admire how fast they are, and how amazing they handle and perform. And I still think they look kind of cool, in my opinion. But this was like the last great era. You have the crazy sounds, the crazy technology here with the exhaust. The hybrid era is something totally different. And of course, like he said, totally gets rid of this. So it is kind of wild that they went through, I'm sure, a lot of money and, research, development, testing, really brainstorming all these ideas kind of in a short period of time, and all for it to just be chopped away, right? Because they're going to a new era in 2014, and none of this is relevant anymore. It is kind of a weird sequence of events, but as I said, hearing the sound of that one, I will link that video at the end of this if you did not see it. It is just crazy. It was a 2011 car, I believe. And these things were wicked from this era. Totally wicked.
Were never outright banned. The regulations were actually changed to account for it, as the exhaust would now have to enter through the car's centerline going forward.
Okay.
And that's about it for our two-part roundup.
There you go. Please check out the link in the description for this guy's channel. Browse it, and you can watch this whole thing uninterrupted. Really good stuff. I mean, great explanation. Very scientific engineering, like, just totally blows my mind. Between my racing history of just, IndyCar is pretty spectacular, if you ask me, and I'd say is a lot more scientific and full of engineering and aerodynamics and tricks, sort of like Formula One. Not the same, not on the same level. But more in that line than like NASCAR, let's say. IndyCar is way ahead of NASCAR when it comes to that. And then, of course, local short track racing and stuff. That's what I've experienced with. It's like funny how it's all racing, technically, but it's like on a different universe compared to Formula One. Like, Formula One is like on another level. It's just wild to learn about. And I really enjoy learning all these different eras, different drivers, different manufacturers. It's really fun. So keep your awesome suggestions coming. I would love to hear your input on this. Was this one of your favorite eras? Do you remember some battles? And did you know the technical, craziness that was going on in this era? I mean, anything you would like to add, I would love to hear it. Please throw a like on there if you enjoyed it and learned something. Subscribe to be part of this amazing community. My name is Ian. You're watching IWrocker. Until next time, y'all. I'll catch you later.